Shavkat, JDM, Ian Garry, and Carlos Prates are just some of the names that make up the future of welterweight.
I love welterweight.
We did make the analogy early on, or I made the analogy early on, that the welterweight division was like baking a cake, but you used more salt than sugar. You had all the right ingredients, but you just weren't using them properly. And I think that's fair to say with welterweight. They are doing a better job of matchmaking right now.
Yes.
But there was a time about 6 months ago where it was a mess. Welterweight certainly has the fighters to be the best division in the future.
Yeah.
But can the UFC truly capitalize on the fighters in this division?
Well, I think it's hard to mess up at this point. I think there's so many good fighters.
They were messing up for a while.
No, they were. But now, like, even down the rankings, you still have Jeff Neal, who's a great boxer. You still have Stephen Thompson, great kickboxer. And then
Gilbert Burns.
I'm not confident that he's going to have good fights for much longer. The way that he looked against Sean Brady, it was great for Sean Brady to show off how talented he is, but Gilbert Burns kind of just got dog walked.
But you put Michaels Morales against Gilbert Burns. That's a big trajectory booster.
Yeah, that's true. It's like a big name to have in your career. You go back once Miles Morales is like top 5 or top 3 ranked, if he gets there, you go back and you look at all of his wins, you're like, oh, Gilbert Burns looks good. But you don't realize Gilbert Burns is on that slide already. So it is what it is. It's a good name to have. What I am really excited about is Carlos Prates. He's probably he just came up so fast. Yeah. He's had 4 fights in 1 year in the UFC. And he's 4-0, all of them walk-off KOs. Yeah. How impressive is he?
He is electric. So today we're going to go over 7 of the top welterweights. They're all 31 and younger. Sorry, Sean Brady. You're 31, but
we don't care.
We don't care about you, bro. No one wants to hear us talk about Sean Brady.
He doesn't have aura.
No.
You know?
None. You beat Gilbert Burns and we're like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Wicked.
It ain't the same as JDM kneeing him in the face and
First fighter we're talking about, 30-year-old, number 3 ranked Shavkat Rakhmonov.
Yeah, 18-0, 18 finishes. It's like the stat that everyone says.
We say it every video.
Every time.
You can't mention Shavkat without saying 18 wins, 18 finishes.
Yeah, it's crazy that he had a scheduled fight with Kelvin Gastelum. That would have been a banger fight.
I would have cooked him.
No, but it would have been
Yeah.
Gastelum, even though he's a little cake-eating fraud, he loves to stand and bang.
Gastelum would have been 20 pounds overweight.
Yeah, I know. And Shavkat still would have been like, sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, so he has that win over Stephen Thompson, which is his best win. Kind of crazy.
But the thing is that he has it's his best win, but he has these 3 good wins over the 3 of the gatekeepers, you know?
Yeah, actually, you made a comment about how the gatekeepers of welterweight need some wins. He's beaten all 3 of them.
Jeff Neal got a win for him. He just needs Gilbert Burns on the resume.
That's true. So Neil Magny, that was an interesting fight. It was a little bit closer than I would have liked. Now we've seen Miles Morales, we've seen Carlos Prates absolutely cook the living crap out of Neil Magny in the first round. He got it done late into round 2 by guillotine, but Neil Magny was not quite as bad as he is now. I think you just start to see that slide, which it's inevitable.
He started the fall off for all the gatekeepers.
Exactly.
If Shavkat didn't choke out Stephen Thompson, he beats Buckley. You heard it here first, Buckley. You're a fraud. So what does the future of Shavkat look like? Clearly there is an interim title shot at 310, we hope.
Yeah.
Because he's legit.
Yeah, if I had to predict, I'm going to say interim belt against Kamaru Usman, even though what's the name? Bilal Muhammad. I genuinely forgot. I'm not even making a joke. I actually forgot his name. Bilal Muhammad, even though he's only out for 6 weeks, I think they make an interim belt. Honestly, it's just hype. Yeah. You know, it adds hype to the...
Well, then you can have the interim champion versus the champion in that fight.
Exactly.
Know?
For all the undisputed marbles.
For the undisputed. Shavkat, 19-0, 19 finishes. Bilal Muhammad, whatever and whatever, 0 finishes.
I could see Usman taking Shavkat to a decision. I think there's a very real chance that Usman is Shavkat's first decision fight.
But have we seen Shavkat in a 5-round fight before?
No.
You have to go 5 rounds without getting submitted by Shavkat. I mean, Usman's good enough on the ground to compete with it, but you never know. You're Usman, you take enough damage, it's hard to really play defense to the takedown.
I think the fact that we saw Usman survive 3 rounds against Hamza Chimaev, who has the goated wrestling.
I actually said this last night that Hamza might be the most talented fighter in the UFC.
He probably is.
In terms of pure talent, he might be the most talented.
No one does that to Rob.
No,
it's crazy.
He is so scary.
Imagine if he was still in welterweight. This division would be unreal.
That there is a championship in Shavkat Rakhmonov's future. What is his championship percentage?
Of winning?
Of getting a championship, undisputed championship inside his career. What is the chances of him getting it?
I think it's about 50-50. As crazy as that sounds, I think a lot of people are going to be like, oh, 85, 90% chance. I think he wins the interim belt probably, even if against Usman. I think it's going to be closer than a lot of people think. Usman's had a lot of time off. He's had tons of time to recover, but his knees are never going to be the same. He has no cartilage in them anymore. So it's just a tough ask to beat undefeated Shavkat. Obviously, he has all the confidence in the world. What he doesn't have is good head movement. So I think if you go up against like a good boxer, we saw against Jeff Neal tagged him, even though he got that crazy standing guillotine against Jeff Neal, which is just one of the most beautiful highlights you can have. I think it's going to be tough for Shavkat to beat like an elite boxer like JDM. That fight would be the biggest banger ever. Of all time.
I think dedicated viewers know how high I am on Shavkat. He's one of my favorite fighters in the UFC. I think championship percentage, like, I'm going to go 70%. Like, I do think that there is a championship in his future, especially with Bilal being the current champion. He is 36.
That's true.
You know, so he is an older champion.
He has like 2 more years max.
And that's 2 fights probably for him. All right, moving on to the future. Ian Machado Garry, another undefeated welterweight, 15-0 inside the UFC.
Yeah, it's exciting to have like multiple undefeated fighters in the same division because it makes for great matchups. I'm about to vent. I always talk about storylines, right? That's like the biggest reason why fights are exciting.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. Why? Yeah, the comment. Why do you like Conor McGregor versus Khabib?
Because of the whole story, the whole build-up.
The fight
was lame, but
it wasn't lame.
It wasn't lame, but it wasn't.
It's not like it was the best fight of all time.
You're not watching that fight for the fight.
No.
You're watching it for the build-up and everything that happened after it.
Yeah, they hate each other.
Yeah.
You're watching, I mean, some of the biggest matchups in history, they're grudge matches because they hate each other outside of the octagon. Someone said in the comments that, this isn't WWE, why do you talk about storylines so much? That's why we watch UFC.
How do these fights happen? Because someone calls out somebody and you
Exactly.
hype up the fight from there. Why was Pereira versus Adesanya as big as it was? Because Pereira followed Adesanya to the UFC.
It's a storyline. You have to understand that's a storyline, and people get invested in these stories of fighters. That's why people have favorite fighters, because they get invested in them. I truly don't understand that comment.
It's not like there isn't storylines in real sports. Oh, this player left this team and now they're playing each other.
Exactly.
There's storylines in sports.
Yeah.
That is why we watch it.
Yeah, I think maybe he doesn't like speak English as a first language, and he meant like he thought story means like book almost, like written out. So who knows?
And like I think there's sometimes where we go into like making it like cinema or like fake. You know, in an ideal world we'd have Islam versus Conor to be Khabib versus Conor, like reincarnated. Like that's because we want that storyline, and I think we do go a little bit over the rails with
but
that.
we're fans.
Yeah, like we can hope. You know, back to the cuck himself.
Yeah, exactly.
Is cuck a swear word?
No, I don't know. So he had that win over Neil Magny. It was a decision, unanimous win. Not as impressive as some of the other guys coming up right now. We've had the Jeff Neal, which was
Split.
super close.
Yeah.
I watched that fight and it was like, oh man, like you didn't do enough in those rounds. And then we got the Michael Page unanimous. That one was, people call it close. It wasn't really that close.
No, it was pretty clearly Garry.
Yeah, unfortunately, Garry turned into a wrestler against MVP, which kind of sucked to see because it was boring.
He's a point fighter now.
Yeah, exactly. He kind of is.
Like he's not like a traditional point fighter. Like I think he's like, but he is kind of like getting to the point where he was getting finishes early on, but now that he's in the welterweight rankings, he's just decision merchant.
I think it's one of those things where you're so protective of your O that you're not willing to take any risks. Shavkat is still willing to take any risk. He's willing to take short, like I'm assuming he would take a short notice fight. He's willing to go in the fire, put himself in the flames with Jeff Neal, a great boxer. Ian Garry is so technical, which isn't a bad thing, but he also suffers from Leon Edwards'
Yeah.
Leon Edwards disease type C.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about his up and coming fight, UFC Tampa main event. Ian Garry versus Joaquin Buckley. Lucas, Garry surely has to get this done. Like Buckley isn't that good.
Well, Buckley's good, but I'm confident in Garry just because of what we've seen out of his last 3 fights.
Yeah.
He is so good at staying on the outside and not getting hit very much. Jeff Neal's actually, I think Jeff Neal's underrated. He got hit in that fight, but I rate Jeff Neal highly. But against Michael Page, we saw he didn't really take that much damage.
No.
Neil Magny, he looked really good. So I think that Buckley needs to blitz in. He needed to blitz in against Wonderboy, and even then he could barely do it.
Yeah, he got like it wasn't a fluky strike, but it was a one punch KO kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. And he had tried that same combination how many times, and then he finally landed it only when Wonderboy was against the cage. So I think Ian Garry, he's going to have a way better chin. He's going to have more grit because he's undefeated. He wants the title shot eventually. Stephen Thompson, let's be real, he's not getting a title shot anytime soon. His career's very much on the downturn. So it's not going to be an easy, Ian Garry's not going to give up. That's what I'm saying. Joaquin Buckley, I think he's going to be frustrated with how much Ian Garry keeps his distance and range, because that's what Ian Garry's good at. Whereas Joaquin Buckley's a short guy. He needs to close the distance. Probably gets no girls. So it's going to be tough. I have Ian Garry probably at like 70, 65% confidence.
All right, moving on to more confidence. Ian Garry, 26 years old. What is your confidence that he becomes a champion eventually?
I think he's not as good as any of the elite. I don't even think he's as good as a Carlos Prates.
But he's 26. Young.
Yeah, that's true. He does have a lot of potential, like Tetsuya Taira sort of thing. It's okay if he loses. I think there's going to be 40% chance. Just because of how long his career could go.
You gave Shavkat 50 and then Ian Garry 40?
Yeah.
I was thinking more along the lines of 25, 30%.
I mean, that's fair. I'm just thinking,
go on the right hot streak.
I know. You think about how many chances he's probably going to have. Like, it could be maybe a Colby Covington situation where you have 3 or 4 chances at getting the belt. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't.
Yeah. Well, and I think especially he is like pretty good on the mic. He is kind of marketable, so... Yeah. He is the future.
Yeah, maybe I'll go like 30, 35.
Yeah.
That's fair.
All right, moving on. Number 4 ranked, 28-year-old Jack Della Maddalena, 17-2 inside the UFC. Another person with a pretty similar kind of... it's a little bit different. It's the first guy who's beaten Gilbert Burns. Sure. He's got the win over Kevin Holland, win over Basil Hafez. We talked about that with our 309 predictions. And then Randy Brown.
Yeah, all solid wins. Like, even though he's had 2 split decisions, that Kevin Holland fight was... I don't know how you give that split decision. It was so clearly a JDM win. And then Gilbert Burns, he gets the win, finishes him. I rewatched all of JDM's fights recently, like within the past 2 weeks. And I was so impressed with how good his pressure is. He's so good at pressuring people and getting them up against the fence. What I really want to see from him is just unloading when they're on the fence. He needs to just go for a finish and get them hurt. Because once he gets them hurt, we saw with Gilbert Burns, you're done.
Yeah.
You're finished. With Kevin Holland, he had him up against the cage so many times, and I just felt like he didn't capitalize as much, which is why we saw a split decision win. It shouldn't have been. And then Basil Hafez, again, split decision, but that's another one where he should have been able to clearly win that fight.
Yeah.
So I think he just really needs to grit down on the mouthpiece and just take a couple shots and get in there.
I think in terms of the guys we're going to talk about today, does he have potentially the most proven striking? Like, there might be guys who have more power that we'll talk about later, but I think in terms of he's done it again enough where I think he has the most proven striking out of the future of welterweight that we're talking about today. I think he has the potential to be the best striker out of all, and just his boxing is so pure.
Yeah, and he has good ground game as well.
Yeah, and like just like his movements, especially when he's standing up compared to Shavkat. Like, Shavkat don't move his head; he just stands there.
Yeah.
JDM like strikes like a boxer. He's moving his body, he's moving his head.
Yeah, he's like a level below Ilya Taporia.
Kind of like that.
Very, very a lot of movement, which I like.
And he's very well-rounded, very diverse fighter too.
Mm-hmm. And he has that submission win over Randy Brown, so you can't underrate his ground game.
Yeah.
I don't think against someone like Shavkat, if they were to fight, I don't think he would go to the ground.
No.
that wouldn't be his first thought. I think his first thought would be, let's keep it in boxing range. And Shavkat, I think, might be able to dominate him in the clinch too.
All right, so JDM, what is your confidence that he could become a future champion?
I'm pretty confident in him. I think once some of those top guys clear out, I think Bilal Muhammad's a tough fight for anyone. So I think if Bilal Muhammad loses the belt to Shavkat, then I think there's a good chance that JDM can win, and he's still younger, right? So I'm going to go probably 55-60%.
I went 75% for Shavkat. I think that JDM and Shavkat are just kind of neck and neck there.
Yeah.
We're always going to compare them together. I'm going to go 60% for JDM just because there is a potential that there could be a hole in his game in terms of his ground game, and we have a dominant wrestling champion. But I do think we do have a lot of strikers coming up in welterweight, which makes it so exciting too.
I think I might actually change my Shavkat pick to a little bit higher. I think just he does have quite a long career ahead of him. I'm probably going to go 70% for Shavkat.
Fair enough. All right, moving on to the guy we're probably the least high on out of all 7 fighters we're going to be talking about today. Joaquin Buckley, number 9 ranked. He's 30 years old with a pro record of 20-6.
New Mansa. He used to be a middleweight, which is crazy because of how small he is.
Yeah, he doesn't even look big in welterweight.
No, he doesn't. He's a short guy, but he's just built like an absolute tank.
Yeah.
So he has a decent build for welterweight. He's very powerful against some of those longer rangy fighters. Even against Thompson, who knows how to keep his distance like a master, he really struggled. So I think we could see him get frustrated. He did have a win over the tallest welterweight in the division, Nursultan Ruzaboyev, which was impressive. I actually really liked that fight. He showed he can just like rugby tackle him, which was kind of funny. And then he had wins over Vicente Luque.
Which is a pretty big win, especially putting that back about, I mean, not quite a year, but Luque's still kind of, he's got name value, you know? It's still a pretty big win.
He's still in the rankings.
Yeah.
And then you have Alex Morono, who's just outside the rankings, and Andre Fialho. So fine wins. They're fine. He's been on a really hot streak. Like, he has a lot of confidence compared to when he was in middleweight. So I don't know. I just like, he's just not my favorite personality. I don't like anything about him, to be honest.
And I just feel like he does have like, he does stuff good. I just don't know if he does anything great, you know? And I think to become a champion, you have to do something like elite. You have to be elite at something. You can't just be super well-rounded and not be elite at something. Like even the most well-rounded fighters, like Ilya, most well-rounded fighter in the UFC, elite striker.
Yeah.
You know, Islam, one of the most well-rounded, elite wrestling, you know?
Definitely.
So...
yeah, he doesn't really stack up in any of the, you know, his clinch work isn't going to be as good as Shavkat. His boxing isn't going to be as good as JDM. His distance isn't going to be as good as Ian Garry. His ground game isn't going to be as good as Bilal's. Like, he doesn't have any, like, one-up on any of the top fighters.
Exactly. So...
confidence level, I don't think he's ever going to be a champion. I'm going to go 5%.
yeah, I'd say give him the dog the bone, give him 5%.
Yeah. There's always that chance that he fluke KO someone.
Our next fighter, number 12 ranked, 25-year-old Miles Morales, taking a break from being Spider-Man, moved over to the UFC.
Respect.
He's 17-0, undefeated. But I mean, it truly isn't fair having superpowers and fighting inside of the UFC.
How is every welterweight undefeated? That's what I want to know. Like, where have these guys been fighting? No, that honestly, it's impressive. He has that win over Max Griffin, Jake Matthews, and Neil Magny. He's very still unproven. He finished Neil Magny in record time.
Yeah, just immediately sent Neil Magny into the shadow realm.
But his wins before that, like, he doesn't have the best resume yet. I'm sure, you know, he's going to work on that as he gets bigger fights. Who do you want to see him go against next? Off the top of your head.
Jeff Neal.
Yeah.
I think that just like, that's a good test. I think that there's some people higher up that it's like a little bit too much. Like, I don't want to see him fight. Maybe if Buckley lost and the timelines lined up, maybe Gilbert Burns, you know, something like that. But I don't think I don't think he has enough behind him like Protez. You know, I think Protez, you can push him and he can take a little bit of a jump, but Michael Morales
doesn't have the hype.
Not quite yet.
Yeah.
You know,
a lot of people like him who know about him, but for some reason I just feel like his name isn't out there.
Yeah. I mean, but I think that's kind of the point of being Spider-Man. You don't want people to know your true identity.
It's true.
When not really too much talk about with Morales. He has the one real big win over Neil Magny where he just crushed him in 21 seconds. But confidence on him to become champion. He is 25, still young, but a little bit unproven.
I'm not super confident just because of the unprovenness and how good the top of welterweight is going to be for the next 5 to 6 years. So I'm going to go 10%.
Yeah, I just think Ian Garry's only a year older, and I think that who knows if he could beat a guy like Ian Garry. We'll go, just because he's so young, you never know. Let's go 20%.
Okay.
Moving on to one of the hottest fighters in the UFC right now. Everyone is talking about this guy after his left hook KO of Neil Magny at the end of round 1. The Nightmare, Carlos Protez.
It's weird because he actually has a better resume than Miles Morales already. He has a win over Trevin Giles. He has Charles Ratke, Li Jiang Lang.
The Leech.
Which is actually a good win.
Which, yeah, because no one knocks out the Leech.
Exactly. Not even Hamzat.
Yeah.
Neil Magny. It's a good win.
Even Trevin Giles is a good win, too.
100%. Yeah. So I think his resume is already stacking out better than what's his name? Spider-Man?
Miles Morales.
Yeah, it's already better than what Spider-Man has. So I'm very high on Carlos Protez. He's 21-6. He has a couple losses.
Next time Carlos Protez fights, loser has to smoke their first cigarette.
No, ew. I will wear Fighting Nerds glasses though. What I'm trying to say is Carlos Prates is on a hot streak right now. I think it's going to be really difficult to beat him just with how crisp his striking looks, and seems like he has natural power, like natural heavy hands.
Yeah, he hits hard.
Like an Alex Pereira and Ilia Topuria.
Like he didn't even fully clip Magny, and Magny went down.
Out cold. So I'm very high on Carlos Prates. I would like to see him against another striker, or maybe someone with a little bit more of a ground game. We could see him against Jeff Neal. That's a banger matchup for either Prates or Miles Morales. But Prates looks like he wants to fight all the time, which is great.
I mean, yeah, he's fought 4 times instead of 2024.
Yeah.
I could see him fighting Winter 2025. I think that's almost a shoo-in.
So he wants JDM for the Australia card.
I think he'll be on Australia for sure. I wouldn't love to see him against JDM just because I think that one of those guys has to lose, and I don't want to see him. That's the point where I eventually get to in welterweight. Is like there's so many guys that we like even the next time we talk about I'm really high on too. Like I don't want to see any of these guys fight each other. Then I got to pick.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to say for confidence level, Carlos Prates becoming champion, crazy as it sounds, I'm pretty high on him. So I'm going to go 30%.
I think his age is the only thing really setting him back.
And his addiction to cigarettes.
I'll go 30% as well. 33.333. All right, and the final guy we're going to talk about today, a guy who made himself known in a place called Paris. Lucas, who was in Paris? Brian Battle was in Paris.
Sorry, I was going to say something else. So he had that win in Paris over Kevin Jousset with a TKO up against the fence. Just freaking hammered him with the right hand over and over again. Before that, he had a no contest to Angelusa, and then a win over AJ Fletcher and Gabe Green, and then a loss to Renat Fakardinov, who's a fraud. Yeah, fraud, but that's not the worst person to have lost to because Renat's huge compared to Brian Battle. Like, Brian Battle's pretty short for a welterweight. Renat is tall for a welterweight, so just tough matchup. And Brian Battle's a different fighter now, you know? When he came back from Paris, he came back a different man. I'm not very high on Brian Battle. I mean, he's exciting. Like, he has that Charles Oliveira cut, and then he has his hype post-fight speeches, which is always fun. But he's 11-2. He's 30 years old. He hasn't faced great competition yet. He doesn't have the type of team behind him as the Fighting Nerds or even like a very serious fighter like Ian Garry. I just don't see him having a future up against these top guys. He doesn't have the same type of power that Carlos Prates has. You see how many punches he had to give Kevin Jousset to put him out? Like, that's a little bit, it's not worrying, but they just stood in front of each other and threw. Yeah. And just see who went down first. This is kind of a homie pick, you know? Like, he's not really in the same tier, but we want to talk about Brian Battle because it gives us an excuse to say the... Sorry, we've had to make a quick, I don't even know, quick break so Lucas can go blonde again. Yo. So welcome back to the Dawson's Corner podcast. Today we have Brian Battle. Hold on 1 sec. I'm just dyeing my hair. You thought I was going to lose to a French dude in Paris. All right. Confidence level for Brian Battle to become champion. Confidence level 1%. 1% if he fought for the title inside of Paris. Yeah, with his walkout music. Yeah, that gives him like extra juice. Yeah. Ooh. Extra juicette? Oh. Yeah, that's going to wrap up today's video. Let us know which one out of the 7 welterweights we talked about today are you most confident in to be the future of welterweight, be the future champion? How many of these guys are going to be champions? Who are you not high on, like Joaquin Buckley? I'm confident in Carlos Prates. I'm moving my pick up to 50%. Woo! Spicy. All right, that is going to do it for us today, and we will see you guys next time. Peace. See